give it to thank you, Becky. We can share it with anyone who hasn't been able to make it today. This is the second time, in fact, that we've run a Breaking the Ice session. We had one earlier on in October for those people who perhaps got started with their volunteering slightly earlier, and had some positive feedback about how well it was received. And I think that was largely because we, as well as me talking, we had a couple of long-standing, very seasoned Chapter 1 volunteers who joined us on the call, as I hope to will today, to be able to just talk a little bit about their experiences in getting started with various different Chapter 1 children over the year. So today's session will include that. We're going to start off by me giving you a little bit of an overview, and then I hope we'll have a couple of volunteers who are going to just share a few words about, as I say, their experiences. Okay, so I'm going to kick off just by taking you through our really tips and tricks about how you might get started with your Chapter 1 sessions. And breaking the ice with your pupil is obviously something that a lot of people do feel understandably a little bit nervous about as they get started. You know, this is a new experience for many of you, and it's also a new experience for the children as well in lots of cases. So you might be paired with a child who has received Chapter 1 support in the past, but the vast majority of you will be working with children who haven't had Chapter 1. And of course, they're quite small, these children, and this is, you know, something that is outside their normal experience. You know, this reading platform on a computer that's in a corner of their classroom, and they are going to be you know, potentially a little bit nervous about it in the same way that you are. So do remember that. And I think that is, you know, very helpful context to bear in mind for your first session. So for those of you who aren't familiar with life in early primary education, it is, I think, important just to remind yourself of the physical context that our sessions are taking place in. So the Chapter 1 laptops are installed specifically in the classrooms of children who are going to use the programme. And we do that very purposefully and intentionally because these children are quite small. They need to have their sessions in a place where there are adults able to supervise them. And the feedback that we've had from schools over the years is that taking children into a separate space where you need to find an adult to then supervise the session is an enormous drain on school resources. So the model that we have, where we tuck our little Chapter 1 laptops into a corner of a classroom, we provide a headset for the children to wear, and they have their reading session where the rest of the class activity goes on around them, is a model that's extremely popular with our schools as to being very kind of light touch for our teachers. But it does mean that there are lots of things going on in that classroom, potentially. There will be learning going on in the background. There will be other children milling around. At certain times of the day, there might be activities that are going on that are particularly interesting to your Chapter 1 child. And so that's something to be aware of, that busy environment that's going to be the backdrop of your reading calls. And the other thing to, I think, be also very conscious of is that a lot of the children using the Chapter 1 programme will be in year 1. So that's only the second year of formal education. In the first year, which is known as reception, children will be really just getting used to the structure of school and doing very basic early reading and, you know, doing still, I think, at that stage, quite a lot of play. And by the time they get to year 1, things have become, you know, I wouldn't say they've become serious, but they've definitely become more established in terms of the school routine. And so that transition from perhaps the more play-based year of reception to the slightly more serious learning and routines of year 1 is something that is very live for children at this time of year. You know, they're still just getting used to that perhaps change in pace and environment. So remember that, you know, as you approach your first sessions. But while you're thinking about the physical context, also really important to bear in mind the emotional context of the children that you're supporting. So I've touched on a little bit of this already, but Chapter 1, you know, is going to be new to most of the children. So brand new things are always a little bit hard. Our pupils have lots of different kinds of backgrounds. They're coming from backgrounds where there might not be much English spoken at home, where actually there might not be much in the way of adult conversation in their families for a whole variety of reasons. And the interactions with adults in their social circle might be quite limited. It may be restricted to the grown-ups they meet at school and a couple of parents or carers in the home environment. And so striking up conversation and being themselves with a new grown-up might be something that takes a little bit of getting used to for some of them. It's also a kind of obvious point, but it does bear repeating and thinking through that the children chosen for chapter 1 by their teachers, and we leave the selection of participating children very much to teachers, are picked precisely because they struggle. So these are children who have been identified as having fallen behind with their reading, who need that extra adult intervention and support and practice. And because they struggle, that can often make them even more kind of trepidatious, I think, about working on their reading, and can also mean that they're coming to the call with a set of nerves about reading in general, which will spill over perhaps into how they get started with you. So do remember that too. I think the other thing also to remember about children of this age is that when you're excited about something, so perhaps you're not actually particularly nervous as a little 5-year-old, you're just really thrilled that this is a new and exciting thing that you're doing. Sometimes just the very fact of being excited can make you slightly lost for words. You're not really sure what to say, and therefore you kind of clam up, which doesn't mean that you don't want to be there and doesn't mean that you're not kind of interested in this whole new thing, but it just means that in that moment, it can be tricky to come out with the right words. And then last but not least, you will find, I think, over the course of the year, in fact, Becky has just started reading with a new child. And she said to me the other day, my first session was fantastic. He was incredibly chatty and enthusiastic. And the second one, all he wanted to do was go to the loo. And I think it's important to remember that children have a bad, they have, like all of us, a bad day from time to time. So it will take you some sessions to work into a kind of routine where everyone knows who everyone is and you create a rapport. So, bear that in mind as well as you're breaking the ice and beginning. So what might you encounter on your first session? I think, as I've said already, there will be a whole range of possibilities. You will have everything, I think, from exuberant chattiness. So a child who, can't stop talking and really, really wants to share everything with you about themselves. And it's impossible for you to get a word in edgeways, to a child who might be rather silent and even a little bit monosyllabic to start with. Often children can also have very quiet voices at this age. And a sort of phrase that's often used by teachers is inside and outside voices. So if you end up feeling like you really can't hear your child at all, you could say, perhaps you could try talking to me with your outside voice, which hopefully might mean that they would increase the volume slightly. And there will also be some children who, with the best will in the world, don't fully understand how to wear the headset. So, making sure, if you really can't hear them, that the headset is on the right way round and that the little microphone that is part of their headset is in front of their mouths. You can ask a couple of questions about that just to check. But I think the thing you'll definitely encounter is a little bit of a lack of understanding about chapter 1. Who are you? How does the platform work? Who's supposed to do what? They're new to it, you're new to it. And I think the thing to probably do in that situation is to be quite upfront about that. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of humor. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of, we're going to do this together. Isn't this exciting? It's new for both of us. I know that we're going to be able to work it out between us. So those kinds of tactics, surfacing the anxiety a little bit and talking about it, are entirely legitimate and to be recommended. When it comes to very practical, in fact, before I move on to what can you do to break the ice and my sort of practical tips, I'll just pause for a second and see if anyone's got any questions about my first few slides. Is there anything, Becky, that's coming through in the chat that people wanted to know or ask?
No, Not so far, no, just some more introductions, and from Lynn, that's some good news that she's been amazed at how orderly the classroom actually seems, and not much background noise so far, so that's good to know.
Yes, that is good to know. We do have a variety of classrooms that come in different shapes and sizes. There may be some of you on the call who are thinking, well, actually, the classroom that I'm reading with is quite noisy. So yeah, it often depends on the teacher and the cohort and the children. So great to hear there's some variety there. Okay, I will crack on then with my sort of practical suggestions about the things you might do in that first session or first couple of sessions to help you break the ice. So first of all, I'd always, as you would in so many situations, and start with introductions and a chat. Be positive, be excited, be full of the joys of the fact that you're new and you're really pleased to be meeting your little person for the first time. And as part of that, I think you can create a bit of a sense of shared complicity. I was saying, bond over the fact that this is the first time for both of you and you're going to get through it together. Feel free to share something about yourself and your life. We've had some lovely occasions in the past where volunteers have actually popped a photo of themselves in the post to the school, addressed to the teacher of the classroom that their child's in, and they've been able to then show it to the child as a way of bringing you as an individual to life for that child, who obviously is only really hearing your voice. And as you're all aware from your training, and those of you who started your sessions, our platform doesn't use video for a variety of different reasons, so you are relying on that voice connection. And it's nice for children to get a visual sense of you if that's something that you're possibly able to do. But in lieu of that, share something about your life, where you live, whether you've got any pets, what you like about reading. There's lots of things that you can think of to maybe kind of kickstart a little bit of a conversation. And when you're questioning your pupil, do remember that little children can feel a bit overwhelmed by too many questions. So you might want to start with questions where they don't really have to think about the answer too much. What's your teacher's name? What did you have for breakfast or lunch? What's your favorite animal? Those kinds of questions. And explore key topics like that. Favorite foods, animals, siblings, they're all absolutely fine. You would have read our safeguarding information and seen perhaps some of the resources and tips in relation to safeguarding. And whilst it's not appropriate to ask children lots of questions about where they live or their family circumstances, it's obviously absolutely fine to ask questions about their likes and their dislikes, and things like, do they have any brothers and sisters? So you shouldn't worry about asking questions in that vein. You might also feel, that you'd like to tell a joke. There's nothing that children like more than giggling. I've got an example on the slide of a child appropriate joke. You have to think quite carefully about something that's going to, be easy for them and to understand and isn't too long. So feel free to tell a joke. Do a bit of imagining. So if you were an animal, what kind of animal would you like to be? That always goes down really well. And you can obviously talk about your animal preference as well as part of that. And then do remember that as you go through the session, there is nothing more motivating to a child who might be a little bit shy to start with than praise. So it's absolutely critical to developing a positive relationship. And you have various things that you can use on the platform to help with praise, but also just lots of encouraging statements where you're not necessarily praising the outcome, but you're praising the effort, and you're also nice and specific with the praise. Always go down really well. We have a set of expert view sessions on how to support reluctant readers, shy and reluctant readers. So it's almost a sort of step on from breaking the ice. If you do these breaking the ice activities and you find that you are grappling with a child who does seem quite reluctant and shy, we had an external specialist called Emma Spears, and some of you might have been at those sessions, who came and talked about different things that you might try. And we have those all recorded and uploaded for the knowledge base. So I'd really recommend that if you're interested, you take a look at those. But they are, there's a nice section in there about how to give praise and to make praise nice and specific so that children really get a sense of what it is that you're congratulating them for. Do remember, of course, that as I've mentioned already, it might well take a few sessions to establish a rapport and a routine. This isn't going to necessarily be an overnight thing that you'll suddenly have a child who talks to you a lot. It may take a little bit of time before you feel like that ice is fully broken. So bear with it, to be patient. And then my last bullet point I've already touched on. So be mindful of safeguarding and what's appropriate, but don't feel that that is going to constrain you so much that you shouldn't ask any questions at all about the children. That's really not the point of safeguarding. We want you to feel like you can establish a relationship. Good. So once you've broken the ice, you've begun your session and you've got started, there are some things that you can do during the course of the session to help keep up that positive momentum. And again, a number of these are covered in quite a lot more detail in our Shy and Reluctant Readers session. But I'd point out just a few of them for you. So in the structure of your session, you might want to kick off with our flashcards. So those are single words that you're appearing on the screen. They're quite quick fire. They can give children a sort of nice sense of success when they can read those back to you. Lots of encouragement and specific praise. The high fives are a lovely tool to use. So they're like virtual stickers that you can send to children and appear on their screen. There's a little bird you can see in the top right there, an example of one of those. So when you're in your reading session module, you'll find the send a high five button right down on the left underneath the menu. And you can click on that and choose from a range of virtual stickers. And once you've selected one, it will appear on the child's screen at their end. So they are very popular, and use them liberally. And when you start looking at stories with your child, so after you've been through flashcards, you can discuss the pictures of the story and why you find stories fun and why they find stories fun. Talk around the book, talk about things that it reminds you about your life. Don't be worried to take a story from a higher reading level and read it to your pupil to start with. If you find that they really are tongue-tied in these first few sessions, and children love being read to, and although obviously the purpose of the Chapter 1 programme is to give them practice in reading aloud, there's absolutely no harm at all in mixing that up a little bit. So maybe they'll read a story to you, and that will be quite a basic story because they're a very early reader. And then you might read a story at a much higher level to them. Or you could start off and do it the other way around. Feel free to play around with those kinds of things in a way that suits you and suits the child that you're working with. Don't also take it personally if a child does seem distracted or isn't engaging it well in those initial sessions. Do be kind to yourself. We've talked about the kinds of context that children come from. Again, in the Reluctant Readers session, there's even more detail about that for you to chew on and to think through. But this isn't your fault. This isn't about you. If you're following all this guidance, you're doing your best to be positive and cheerful and enthusiastic. It may just take a little bit of time. So, don't worry about it too much. And on that vein, don't worry if you don't manage a full 30 minutes to start with either. So in the early part of the reading relationship, you might feel that, the stamina of the child that you're reading with is not fully developed, and that actually after 20 minutes, it's clear that they've had enough and their concentration is waning. So concentrate on getting 20 really productive, great minutes out of the session. And if you end a little bit early, that's absolutely fine. I think as adults, sometimes we think, we're supposed to do this for half an hour. We've got to stay at it. But, there's at this stage of a child's learning journey, their stamina is growing all of the time. So you might earlier on in the year, have slightly shorter sessions, and then you'll build that up as things progress and as the relationship deepens. Great. So I think I am now at the point where I wanted to kind of bring in a couple of incredible, amazing volunteers who have read with children, different children, for the last 5 years. So I know that Deryn is definitely in the waiting room. I'm not sure if Dominic has joined us yet, but I'm going to hand over to them shortly. But before I do so, were there any questions that people had for me before we hear from some real life Chapter 1 volunteers?
There aren't any in the chat, Emma, at the moment, unless there's something coming through now. No, I don't think so. So obviously nice and clear.
Fantastic. Let's hope so.
Yeah.
And that I haven't just, made
Yeah.
everyone fall asleep. Deryn, I know, definitely won't do that. So I think she's with us. So it'd be great, Becky, if you could spotlight Deryn. I'll stop sharing my screen so that we can all see Deryn. And I think Deryn's just going to talk a little bit about her experience with the 5 different children that she's worked with, or is it even 6 now, Deryn?
It may be 6 actually, because I did do a separate one for the evening at some point. So yes, so it's possible. Hi everybody. My name is Deryn, and I've only just joined, so I didn't hear the introduction or Emma's information. So hopefully I won't be repeating some of the things that she said. But I was invited here to talk to you about how I break the ice with the children I work with. And yeah, the first thing I say usually is on my very, very first meeting is, hello, what's your name? Even though I know the name of the child will tell me their name, and I'll go, oh, that's such a lovely name. Ask a little bit about them, like, how old are you? Usually 5, 6. They're usually 5 or 6. And I say, oh, that sounds very grown up. Do you like reading? A lot of times they say yes. And then I introduce myself. My name is Deryn, and I'm reading with you. We're going to have a lot of fun. We will learn together, and you're going to love reading. I try to bring that in, because some of the children are a bit nervous and they don't know what to expect. So I want them to think that it's going to be fun, which it usually is. Even if they're struggling, we still make it fun. The other thing I tend to do with the children is, as we start with the flashcards, just randomly looking at some words. To be honest, with the child I'm starting with now, I just started last week and I had the second session yesterday. What I did with the flashcards for her was I went through the first line just to see how she sounded words, and then the second line this week. And some words she already knows and some words she doesn't. So as we're reading the books, she'll choose a book, and as we're reading the books, she'll maybe stumble, and I'll say, can you try look at that word, just try and make it engaging. Depending on the level of the children I'm working with, some of them we start with proper sounding out. But once I know that they can already do that, we go on to the reading. And each session, when they come, what did you do yesterday, or how was school, or how is the day going? Anything to make them feel comfortable. And after that, we start the reading. When we read, I then also ask them what the story is about. So to give an example, if it was about the lost slipper, I think that's one of the ones we've read. As we're going along, I will then ask the child, what is this book about? Or what is this story about? And they most of the time will go off on they'll tell me about the story, but they may go off on a tangent. But it gives me an idea that they understand what they're learning. Then we carry on again. And when we get to the end of the book, we go back again to say, so what was it they were looking for? To see if the child remembers. For me, it's just engaging. And I try to meet the child where they are. If I notice they don't like to talk, I try and bring it out of them. If I notice that they talk a bit too much, I try and rein it in so that we can at least do some work. And we always finish with a game. always, even if it's just 5 minutes, and they always win. I don't know if that helps. I know it's a bit simplified, and probably a lot of people know this already.
That's brilliant, Darren. I don't know whether anyone has any particular questions for you that they might want to put in the chat. But I also wondered whether there was any particular of the children that you've worked with that you would highlight particularly as maybe having, have been unusual in the way that it, took you some time perhaps to break the ice with them, or anything, striking, okay, perhaps a little bit of a case study.
Yes, I'll give 2 examples, but before I do that, I see a question where somebody has mentioned about the difficulty in the background with the background noise, and yes, that can be a challenge. For me, if I can reschedule, as in change the time of the day, I try and do that if the noise is too much. And with the child I had last, the first time I chose was particularly busy in that class. So I looked for another slot that fit with both of us, and that worked better. The only thing was I had to be careful because soon after that they needed to go out, and I didn't want my pupil to miss out. What else did I want to say? Yes, so with the case study, I had one particular child who I knew did not like reading, maybe felt he or she couldn't do it. So what the child used to do would be to say to me, I can't hear you. I can't see what you're showing me. Nothing's showing up. And then one of the times when the child did that, I then said, okay, that's fine. Let me get somebody to help. And can you ask your teacher to just help us quickly while, we're trying to sort it out? He said, oh no, I can see it now. I can see it now. So it was obvious that the child could see it, but didn't want to participate. So with somebody like that, if I feel that a game will encourage first, I'll say to them, okay, so next week, when we finish reading today, next week when we come back, we're going to start with this game because you've done really, really well. And then when we finish reading, we finish with a game as well. Because that, I think, at least with the ones I've had, that always works. Then I did have another child who initially, when I started, I was a bit taken aback because I felt, what's this child doing on this program? He seems very, very good. But it wasn't because he did start not so good, but he had built up. He was a fast learner. And by the time we finished the program, he was so, so good. Luckily for me, I had him day and in the evening as well. So I was able to communicate with the parents as well, to encourage them, to continue to encourage him. So when he gets home, he reads. They set out time for him, encourage him to read. It was, it was a very, very rewarding, should I say, session with this particular child. But even with the ones we struggle with, one of the things that gives us joy is when you see where they started from and where you finish with them. You definitely will see the progress.
Darren, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And Darren joined us on our first Breaking the Ice session in October. And a number of people said that just listening to Darren's voice as a small child must just be so kind of comforting and enveloping, because there's such warmth in it. So I can imagine that definitely helps break the ice. So that's really thank you, Darren, for sharing your wisdom there. We are also lucky enough to be joined by another very long-standing volunteer, Dominic from Sage, who I can see has now made it into the session. So I'm going to hand over to Dominic too, who can hopefully also just say a few words. Becky, hopefully we can spotlight Dominic there about the experiences that he's had with helping break the ice with Chapter 1 children. Thank you, Dominic.
Well, no, thank you for giving me the time, and I think I agree with all the sentiments. Darren has a natural voice and demeanour for this kind of thing. So I think I might be into my 5th year. And again, I don't want to repeat too many of the things Darren's already said. But for everybody on the programme, that point that Darren made about it being hugely rewarding, what I would recommend is take a few notes of how, I either use the platform to record the notes, but take some notes about where you think your pupil is, and then read those at the end of the year. You know, you will spend, you know, you'll complete between 20 and 30 sessions if you do a full school year, which is a minimum of, you know, 10 hours of reading with this child. So by the end of the year, without fail, you will see massive progress, and you would have been a contributor to that. And it's so rewarding. That's the thing that's kept bringing me back each time. Specifically on icebreakers, again, I'm delighted because I've used exactly the same techniques as Darren, so I would definitely highly recommend those. A couple of specific points that I've seen in the chat and some things that Darren mentioned as well. So noisy classroom doesn't work with every teacher, but what I find is after every session, even if it's just a little snippet, if you just send notes to the teacher about how that session's gone, if there are any issues. The 2 teachers I've worked with in the last 2 seasons, the last 2 school terms, have been absolutely brilliant. If I've commented about the classroom being a bit noisy, I've noticed the next session I've done, there's been an effort to maybe let the other pupils in the classroom know that there's a session going on. The teachers have been massively responsive, and they're really appreciative of the feedback that you give about the pupil, or at least the last 2 have that I've been working with. The other thing I would say around, there was another point made about being kind to yourself. And again, as I said, you're going to spend an entire year with this, with the pupil. So don't put too much pressure on yourself to make all that progress in the first few sessions. It will come in time. So just back yourself, keep plugging away at it, even if you have a particularly difficult child who's English might not be their first language, you know, they might not have the right support structure at home, that reading's a big thing for them, and then frankly, they just might not like it. So another thing that I've done in the past is I've asked the pupil to share with me, what do they think about reading? You know, maybe give it a score of 1 to 10, 10 being amazing, 1 being, oh my goodness, I wish I could do something else with my life. And just pick where that is. And then maybe halfway through the school year, just ask the same question again. And guaranteed, don't know how much it'll be higher, but guaranteed it will be higher for you. And just getting that conversation going, getting them to talk about what they think about reading, whether they find it challenging or fun or not, is a great way to start that conversation. What I've then done after that is set a goal. So if they hate reading, last thing what I want to do, score it a 1, I'll say, well, I'm going to see if we can get that to a 5 or a 6. And this is what we're going to do that. We're going to have some, and we're definitely going to have fun. So Darren finishing every session with a game, absolute noughts and crosses. I think I lost 17-3 last year. I'm losing 3-0, of course, and I take it very seriously, or at least I let the pupil know that. It's a load of fun to finish the session, and as Darren already pointed out, using that as an incentive is really useful. Depending on what day you read, if I read on a Monday typically at the moment, so I can always ask about what the child's done at the weekend, if they did anything fun, and each week without fail, as Darren's already mentioned, I ask the pupil to do some practicing at home. And then every time we come back to the session, I ask them if they've fulfilled that promise. And then I ask what it was that they read, and then they talk a little bit about that. So that's a useful thing to get starting with as well, to get the child to speak. Sorry, I feel like I'm rambling a bit, but the other thing I did in my very first session is, if you're not really sure, you can't get the conversation going, then I just did a tour of the platform. So we're just going to have a look around at this new tool here. Oh, have a look. Here are the games. We'll definitely play some of those games, show them where the stories are, go to the whiteboard. If you write the child's name in the whiteboard, it's always a word that they can read, because they know their own name. It's so familiar. So start with that, and then, as Darren said, some simple words, some sounding out. If you just forget a story to start off with, but if you just start with a couple of words and then give them loads of praise, that really boosts confidence. And you'll see from session to session that the confidence will keep growing. But once you've tapped into that growing confidence, then the rest just flows, and the progress is massive. I think that's probably a starter. I don't know if sorry, one other thing I wrote down as well is, if you're struggling with the reading, and Darren touched on this, just ask them about what the story is all about, but use the pictures. So all of the stories have pictures. I've had pupils sort of guess what's going to happen next on the next page, and you use the pictures and talk about it if you're struggling a little bit with the reading, because the pupils just enjoy the fun of that.
Dominic, thank you. That's really helpful. And I've never, I think the idea of doing a little tour of the platform is actually a great one. I've not heard that one before. And obviously putting the child's name on the whiteboards is a really nice thought, as you say, because that will, for lots of children, be the first word that they do learn. And often those words can be quite complicated, actually. Your own name doesn't necessarily follow phonics rules. So, being able to praise them for being able, having such a, great command of reading, because they can, master their name is fantastic. So thank you both very, very much. I know that we're having lots of very positive comments coming through in the chat saying how helpful it's been to listen to you both and have a sense of that real life experience. But before we finish, is there anyone who did have anything else that they wanted to ask me or to ask Darren or Dominic now that they've spoken?
I can't see anything else coming up in the chat at the moment. Just lots of thanks for both Darren and Dominic.
Great. Well, I think we will
leave. Yeah.
A few people have had to drop off, so I think we will draw things to a close and give you back some of you what will be your lunch hour. So hopefully that's been a kind of useful icebreaker for breaking the ice, and a kind of a top tips, as I say, from two extremely experienced volunteers. So thank you for all of you for giving your time to support a Chapter 1 pupil. Thank you, Darren and Dominic, for doing that for 5 years in a row as well. And very, very good luck. And we hope that you have a really, really positive experience in the year ahead.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.